What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always a good time when I'm hanging out with Joe.
Likewise, Mark. Yes, yeah. Um, yeah. How have you been?
Busy.
Yeah.
That is kind of my life. I've chosen the struggle of being in startups and entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And it's a chosen struggle because it's a lot of work. But man, it's thrilling. Every day I wake up with a new problem to kind of solve.
There's always a new problem to solve, and I think most of the time the other problems didn't quite get solved either. So it just piles.
Very true. Very true. It's just literally building the plane while flying it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's fun. Yeah. What's the startup you're at for the audience who may not know?
Yeah, so I'm employee one at Gable AI. Basically, data contracts, data change management, kind of shift left. That's kind of the areas that we're in right now. But essentially, how I kind of got into there was created content on LinkedIn about data engineering and scaling kind of data ops. And from there, one of the people I interviewed was Chad Sanderson. And a month later, he was like, "Hey, that problem that you're really talking about that you wanted to solve, I'm solving it now, and I got funding." And I was actually thinking about starting my own company,
Yeah, yeah.
and was that's why I was doing kind of the newsletter stuff to like start doing user interviews. And immediately I was like, wait, he already has funding, already has founders, already built it, 300 plus user interviews. I don't need to start this. I just need to join. And so it's been really cool just to basically see, like, literally, I was there when we were just in a random office in a boardroom, nothing else. And now we have our own office. We've raised Series A, all this kind of stuff. So it's been a really kind of wild, intense journey. But I now see what it takes to go from like ideation to like actual business with customers at this scale, which was something I was missing beforehand.
Interesting. What did you think it was going to be like versus what you are now seeing?
Yeah, man. I think so. So I think the first year I was not surprised much because I've tried building my own company before and I knew what it was going to take. I knew how to deal with uncertainty. What really kind of got me out of my comfort zone was when we did our first public launch. And that was September of 2023, I believe. And so keep in mind, we're in stealth all that time. So it was busy, we're building, but no one really knew. Just people know like Mark and Chad are doing something and putting out content. But when we launched, we got like thousands of signups and interests
Mhm.
and became this huge thing. And literally the next 3 months, Chad and I were just in sales calls back to back all day going through that. And so what I thought was hilarious was I was thinking, oh man, this launch is gonna be so big, it's gonna be take up so much time. After the launch, I can relax. I can do nothing. I did the big project and I got what I need to do. And it was the opposite. It accelerated. Um, and I feel like I've been sprinting ever since that date, just trying to keep up. And so the biggest surprise was that there is no rest, if that makes sense. Like if you're
Mhm.
successful at what you do, you're going to build momentum, and that momentum is going to require more effort. And I think that is the part that I've been really learning, especially from a leadership perspective, is like how do you manage that momentum? How do you make the actual right trade offs when you have that level of momentum and you have the urgency, but you need to be more thoughtful. And then going a little bit further is like, all right, you get to a point where you actually need to start scaling and bringing on more people. How do you maintain a momentum with more people? That's all kind of the hard lessons I've been learning kind of the past few years.
Yeah. when for full disclosure, we do have calls once in a while to to talk about the things that you're going through, and it's what you described seems very accurate. The momentum is, I think, a lot of founders, especially first time founders, they want to get that big bang experience, so to speak, where it just kicks everything off. But if you're lucky enough to get that, which I would say,
Yeah, it's a good problem to
if
have.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
because for
and
a lot of
something
cases you don't get it at all,
Yeah, and
actually.
so something I want to highlight too for that why that was possible is it wasn't because we just had a really good launch. That was a one moment, but that was a moment of capture of all the interest that Chad built up through his content and thought leadership over like 3 years.
Oh yeah.
And then Chad hired me because he saw I was doing the same thing for like 2 years. And so it's not just that like you do a big launch, things happen. it took years of intentional kind of planning and knowing what would work to get that result. So it was. I don't want to say like it was like there's obviously some luck part of it, but for people listening, it's like there is a path to actually do this. It's very simple. It's just very hard to do.
Well, most people don't have the patience for it, right? I remember when Chad was starting to talk about data contracts and
Mhm.
shifting left and so forth, right? And granted, I think there was at least Andrew Jones was also talking about data contracts. I think around the same time ish,
Yes.
thereabouts. Um, but I think in terms of the person who got the publicity around the idea, also I think popularizing shift left. I think Chad was very instrumental in that. I didn't
Yes.
see anyone else doing it quite at the level that Chad was doing. Not to take anything away from other people. Other people did a great
Yeah.
job, but Chad was just like in a completely different level in terms of
Yeah.
the
And
content.
I've got to see behind the curtains of how he's done it, and it's a masterclass in intentionality.
Yeah,
I the advice I give people for who want to do content is like just post. But that's not the full picture. That's just the requirement. If you can't post every single day and do content every single day, like the rest won't work out.
right.
Once you've done that and you built up that muscle, what Chad really does is like he thinks about like who's his audience, who's he's going to be like speaking to, what are their core problems, and then breaking them down into key concepts and ideas, and then iteratively testing them out until one kind of really pops up and becomes very popular. And that again, that happens over months, years. And so if you're wondering, like, I'm still figuring out because I see Chad's posts very long. They're like blogs in themselves, and they have hundreds of comments.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like oh great post. It's like people arguing and debating in the comments. And I think a big piece of that now that I've seen is because he's intentionally like figure out where are the key terms that people actually feel pain around, where
Yeah.
are the key phrases that people actually are feeling, and again that requires hundreds of calls with people facing it,
Hmm.
building in this space, all this different stuff.
Oh yeah. I think you gotta have a pretty thick skin for this stuff too, because as you point out in the comments, and like, you probably have posts like this. I have posts like this where they're not even arguing with you; they're just arguing with each other, but then sort of arguing with you too.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really have a
And
problem
imagine,
with.
especially for
Yeah.
you, because you write about data modeling. I won't touch that because it's too much of a kind of a fire fest of like people, not the fire fest, but like fire of people kind of being mad at each other, being like,
It's a
no
bit
data
hot. It's a
vault,
hot
no big
topic.
table.
Yeah, I think I've managed to get past the religious arguments and stuff, or at least I think by this point, enough people know that it is what it is. So, this is happening. I think for me, I got a lot of pushback initially. Like people didn't want me to write
Mhm.
this book. Like literally got messages from people saying they don't want me writing this. Um,
Yeah.
which if you know me, if you tell me not to do something, I'll probably just go do it. Just for fun. Right. But I think this was the same thing that Chad and to some extent your content as well went through where people would say, well, like, who are you to talk about this kind of stuff?
Hmm.
This, that, or the other thing. But as you point out, just perseverance and I think accepting
Yeah.
the critiques, accepting the feedback, but also uh, I think having a low tolerance for bullshit is also
Hmm.
really key. Like Chad's super focused. He's a good friend. He's one of the most focused people I know. And you're one of the most persistent people I know. And I think you just go at it like don't care at all either, right? And I think that was a good
Yeah.
combo when you guys, joined together with Gable. It's like that makes a ton of sense because very good complementary skills, but both like
Mhm.
just disciplined and like hungry to get after it, especially in terms of content. The thing I notice about content, it's your interview actually, but like with content, it's funny just because I think people who aren't producing content on a regular basis tend kind of look at it like, well, you're just an influencer.
Yeah.
You're just this, that, or the other, disparagement. But this, like it or not, like attention is the currency of how things work today, and content is how you get there.
Yeah, and actually, you know what's funny enough is that so going back to that 2023 thing we had that launch, 2024, Chad and I actually stopped doing a lot of content
You did
because
actually.
we had so many calls that were and so many like focusing on the sales cycle, like we were going through the bottom of the funnel instead of the top of the funnel, and we realized that was a huge mistake because you focus on that and you get through those core people after a certain set of months, and then you have to restart again.
Yeah.
And because you haven't been doing the content, your worldview has changed because you've actually done the reps of actually implementing things, and your worldview no longer aligns with the messaging that you have. And you have to re-figure out that messaging. And so I think if we were to go back, we would actually continue doing the content. And as well, it's because now going back into content in 2025, we are getting way more attention again. We're getting the terms out. I'm getting more calls for things. You can feel the difference of like people paying attention to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so I think less of like, don't stop content is more so find that balance, because I don't think I'll be able to have the content I have now without kind of doing the reps and being kind of in the trenches trying to implement data contracts.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, you do. Yeah, it is definitely a balance. Like I find that with my book. I'm sure you're finding that with yours as well, where it's, and I can't even imagine you guys took on the task of writing a O'Reilly book and doing a startup at the same time. That was,
It's so funny. I just remember 3 months into Gable, Chad and I were sitting in this office in Seattle, and we're like, what are our tactics for go to market? And we list out a bunch and then create some like time of effort, impact, all these different metrics. And the book rose to the top. And we're like, we could totally write a book for our go to market motion. Like we already write blogs every week. How is this any different? It is very different.
yeah,
It is like a completely different task of like writing a blog is maybe 5 pages, but to expand it to 30 pages on the single concept and then make sure you're correct, as well as knowing that it will be printed and not be able to change like a website blog. The intensity and level of care and research that goes into it is just a completely different level. But also on the flip side is that now when we go into our sales calls, we're so well polished and refined in how we think, and we can be more consultative and thought leadership based because we put the reps of thinking deeply and wrestling with these kind of concepts for over a year and a half now,
yeah,
for a writing perspective, even outside the startup.
oh yeah, and it makes your sales pitches. I'm sure your discussions. I wouldn't even say pitches. You don't need to pitch much. It's just, but you're that much more articulate about what you're describing to the customer, and because you've also put in the sets and reps with the customers,
Mm-hmm.
it's coming from a place of experience and school of hard knocks. So it's like there's no downside to it except the fact that it's just a massive investment of your soul.
Yeah, and kind of the key kind of phrase that Chad and I kind of adhere to is we don't want to be the most heard in the industry and space. We want people to feel as if we hear them the most.
Yeah.
And I think that difference right there really changed it, because a lot of the people we talk to, like so many people are struggling with data quality, data governance, wherever it may be. It's just a hard problem no matter where you are, no matter how talented or big the company is. And to go into somewhere and finally give them words to explain their pain and give them words to explain to others where they'll get it, that's the powerful part. That's the thing that people are latching onto. Is less like the content and being good ideas or anything like that. It's more so, someone gets me when I'm struggling with my career that's stressing me out. And they're giving me tools to solve it and explain it to others to bring coalitions in to solve this as well.
Yep.
And I think that's actually why I joined Chad. I saw his first data contract article, and it was like, oh my God, someone finally gets the problems I've been trying to solve.
Yeah.
And I think back then I was when I was trying to become a data engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a lot of mentorship from you. So this is full circle to kind of come talk to you on here. And yeah, the problems that I was talking to you about, Chad was discussing. And so that was just kind of a click moment for me of where content can be this really powerful tool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you were leaning into it quite a bit too with On the Mark and other stuff. Like, maybe walk me through that progression too, sort of the hero story from the beginning of your journey, because I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so for on-mark data, I still pursue that. It's just more of a background thing. But the way I think about my career is I have this larger ultimate goal that I'm trying to pursue, which is how can I solve social problems through technology and business at scale, right? Very broad, right? And then from there, what is the portfolio of skills do I need to build to make myself most successful to actually achieve that 10 years from now? And so one of those, like, I need to have a technical skill that I really enjoy. That was data. I need to learn how to build up an audience and brand. I need to know how to build a business, right? And then you may try something that may be too big. So I tried building a company that was VC backed and went through the Y Combinator kind of application, interviews, all the stuff. Didn't work out. I went too big. I didn't have enough skills yet. So how do I break that down? Well, I can start my own company, just a simple LLC, so I can get the reps. How do I bring on a lawyer? How do I do the contracting? How do I set up the infrastructure? How do I set my own sales funnel? I can join another company who's doing it at a much larger scale where I can learn on their dime. All right, well, this is how you do B2B. This is how you raise a round. This is how you work with publishers and things like that, right? And so the way I kind of approach it with on the mark data was, at the time, I tried doing a company, didn't work out. I was too broke to be a founder, so I had to have a day job. How do I still keep this entrepreneurship skill kind of sharpened?
Mm-hmm.
And so I created content on LinkedIn to actually get my job because I was laid off during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can just build a funnel to myself. I have jobs apply to me. So I just started creating content, and then people started coming to me for interviews. And that's how I got my job at Humu, which is the previous startup I was at.
Yeah.
And I saw the power of that, of content again, and building funnels. And I was like, let me just keep on doing it. Let's see what happens. It wasn't like some intentional, I want to be an influencer kind of thing. I was like, I love data. I love writing about it. And people somehow love it too. And next thing you know, I have a huge audience. And I had, it was actually Super Data Science. They reached out to me to do like some paid thing. And I was going to do it for free. And they're like, well, what do you want to charge? And I was like, what? I can charge for this?
Yeah.
Because I was just a nerd, just nerding out, having fun. And that was my first dollar as an entrepreneur is from them, is actually like, I was like, all right, let me just, it was like a course I paid like maybe like $500 or something like that. It was like way too small of a price tag, right? But I didn't know back then. And so I had to create an LLC over the weekend, get my business bank account. And from there, I was like, oh, this is going to be an actual business. There's an actual avenue for me to actually build up these entrepreneurship skills that I won't get in my day job.
Mm-hmm.
Let me lean into this and just take small little experiments to like build up kind of the assets for this. And then from there, I get income from the various, I used to do influencer marketing, which I don't do anymore. I think that could be another discussion itself right there.
Mm-hmm.
And like LinkedIn learning courses. Sometimes I'll write a blog for another company and things like that. And so I get this money, and then pre-tax, I reinvest it back in business. So like I'll hire a lawyer and start building out infrastructure for like my legal documents.
Yeah.
I'll get advice from a CPA, things like that. And that stuff, it builds over time where I now can put it into other LLCs, or maybe like I have another project to open source, talking to people. I have the infrastructure of a business to put the IP under LLC, right? And start thinking more strategically instead of some just nerd who's building. It's a nerd who's building assets and IP mm-hmm. and having a business structure around that. And the bigger piece is I want to do my own company. How can I de-risk myself to other investors, and other employees? Well, if I can show I've already built up a small business to have the reps, I show I joined another startup and done the same thing, it makes me a much more compelling person to invest into, especially at the early stages. That was a long tirade.
No, it's great actually. And I think one thing investors, and anybody really wants to see is you have the sets and the reps with, establishing a business, but also that you can be effective and hopefully master the art of distribution. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I'm sure you see this too. There's plenty of startups out there. I would wager that most startups are going to be challenged not by how awesome their product is, but whether or not anybody even cares at all. And I can guarantee you that most people don't care. This is a harsh thing to say, but it's also true. Again, you're competing for attention. You're competing for a lot of stuff. You're competing for budget. And this is one thing where like you and Chad have done, I think, a phenomenally just world-class job is like, you punch through that wall of obscurity. If you and Chad started Gable and it was just nobody knew about this idea of data contracts, nobody knew who you were, you would probably be like most of the startups out there that
I wouldn't have joined.
Probably wouldn't have well, true, you wouldn't have. But say hypothetically you did, right? It's like you would have had this problem.
Cost.
Yeah.
Right? There's a huge opportunity cost because either I could go all in on the mark data and try to scale that. I could have gone to like another company and just do the big tech kind of play for that. But it's because I've had the failures of other kind of entrepreneurial things. Like I tried like probably 6-7 different businesses where I made my first dollar as an entrepreneur. So I saw all the mistakes I made, and when I saw what they were doing, they like avoided all those mistakes.
Yeah.
And so, so for context, like I quit my job before I even had a contract, even before they closed their round.
Yeah, I
Because I
remember.
was just so confident. And looking back, my parents were just like, "You did what?" Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
but
right,
it
the
bet
funding
paid
too.
off.
That was after, it's actually kind of the tail end of the funding bubble too. So it was kind of like it was definitely a risky move in retrospect because it wasn't 20 or 2021. It was I think 2022, and it was different then. So
Yeah, but you know what's funny is like I didn't have any worry at all because I would just because I saw this the kind of the key ingredients were there, I
yeah,
knew it was gonna happen. Like it had all the right pieces where I would be surprised if investors didn't go into it.
yeah.
And I don't think I would have been able to see that if I didn't try doing my own companies beforehand.
Oh no, you don't. I mean, I've done a lot of companies and probably as many as you have, probably a few more. But yeah, most of them failed spectacularly. I wouldn't say, or not even spectacular, just like without even a whimper. It's just like this is a false start. But that's the only way I think you can really get good um, at business, really, and that whole game is just to
Hmm.
do it and do it often, and
Get the
don't
failures out of the way.
yeah, that's all it is. And you don't have to go big. You don't have to have like catastrophic loss. I mean, but it's like you just got to get the sets and reps in. That's all there is to it. And over time, you get pretty used to the idea that yeah, here's how you go make your own dollar. I put that, somebody posted on it was Michael Dragals. He had a good post on LinkedIn. Was it earlier this week or last week? And it was just about getting out there and making your first dollar. As an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
he left Confluent, sold his company to that. And now he's just out starting a new startup, and it's cool. Like he's not making anything near where he did before, but I think he will. But the whole thing is like getting that first dollar. I think people don't appreciate people, especially if you're just in a day job and you haven't ever actually had to go make a dollar on your own. I don't think people appreciate how difficult that actually is to make a single
Oh yeah.
dollar, just one.
Yeah, no, it's so hard, and the kind of I actually have my first dollar framed because just how hard it was.
Yeah,
I have like the invoice kind of framed for
that's
that,
cool.
and the things that I kind of tell myself is like not only make it the first dollar, but can I do it twice? If I do it once, maybe I got lucky, but if I do it twice, I figured out a pattern.
Yeah,
And so for me, it's like, can I make my first dollar? Can I make my first dollar twice? All right, can I do $10 and just add a zero each time? And that's what I've been really kind of focused on is like how do I what's the kind of chasm between this zero and this other zero being added?
hmm
It gets exponentially harder.
yes. At about after about the fifth or sixth zero, it gets harder for sure. Because again, you're dealing in just well, it's a multiplication problem. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, I think the big shift goes from I'm providing a product, I know a problem, and I can serve it to that. Plus, I've built a relationship where they trust spending that amount of money and time with me.
oh yeah, yeah, and that takes a long time to build that reputation. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, just again to get one of these audience, like go try it. Uh, I mean, it's funny because I think it's almost easier now more than it ever has been.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's also more crowded, depending on the type of thing you're trying to do. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
what walk me through that chasm then? You talked about going from one of these to 10 of these and 10 of these to 100 to 1,000 and more. Like
Yeah.
what's that mental leap like? And also
Yeah.
what does it take to get there?
Yeah. So I think the first dollar is the chasm is do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in yourself? Can you actually do that? To even like just try to get a dollar, like that's a big mental leap because the whole time growing up, you're most often told 9 to 5 job. That's what you do. That's the safe bet to make. And so once you believe in yourself enough, it doesn't have to be fully believing in yourself, just enough to actually go out there and get that. I think that's the first chasm. Actually, that's actually a massive chasm to pass.
That's I think the
Um,
hardest one.
Exactly. So, and going from 1 to 10 is like, and again, these are smaller numbers, but it's like, okay, like you're intentional about what you're trying to do. Like, you're not just trying to go after the cheapest thing, right? And again, it could be, let's just say 10 to 100, right? Just to keep it small. But then going to 100 to 1,000, it's actually like, okay, I've actually thought about it. I know there's a pain and people want to pay me a service for this. And so going from there, like you can probably get away with it. You have like a very well packaged and tailored idea. People can buy one-offs or they do like a service thing. But then going to that 1,000 to 10,000 is where you have to actually have something that's really validated, has to solve a meaningful problem, and you have to compete against others because now you're competing, starting to compete about individual budgets
Hmm.
for that. That's for on the mark data where I've kind of stopped at in that range. But then going to Gable, I've started seeing this what the six figures looks like now. And so going to that, then you start getting to the relationships.
Yeah.
Cool. I've built the trust online through the content. I know what I'm talking about. You've jumped on a call with me and like I have good vibes. I'm not trying to swindle you. I'm actually really trying to solve your problem. Um, and now I'm working with you as partners to help you sell into this org and like basically think through like how do you secure budget at this level, and who are the right leadership people you need to get leadership you need to have bought in. And so there's so much visibility between you and your initial contact, and that person's taking on way more risk than you
Tons.
to bring you on. And so like people can lose jobs if they take the wrong bet on you, especially for these price tags, right? And so for them to bet on you and on something that's untested as a startup, huge leap of faith, huge amount of trust. So much work goes up to that point, during that point, and after that point. And even all that, the timing can be off and it may not work out. And so that's what I'm seeing to that jump. And then for even further than that, that's really starts getting to like the executive kind of discussions. And I wish I could talk about that right now, but I'm not there yet. So
Yeah.
TBD. We'll come back in a couple years.
What's that?
Yeah. Does that align with what you've seen on your side as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's I think when you're starting out too, it's unless it depends on what you're selling, obviously, but
Mm.
your mind is definitely fixated on smaller amounts. Then you get used to that, right? So
Yeah.
it's the hedonic treadmill, classically, of just you want more. So, but you got to
Yeah.
figure out what that
The
means, right? Just because you want
the
more doesn't mean the customer wants more. Spend
the
more.
worst feeling ever is when you give out a price and they say yes instantly, and you're like, wow, I didn't price myself right. They would have gone way higher. And so yeah, you also want again building that thick skin. You want them to say no first. You want that negotiation because there's so much hidden stuff that you need to uncover that won't really be there until you start really sign your name, pay the cash, right?
Hmm.
And that's where you start really into the real needs and what are the real drivers that actually bring success.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and it takes a lot of chutzpah to come in with a higher price, I would say. But you're right. I mean, I've come up with prices that I thought were high, and I was like, damn it. Like
Exactly.
you know,
And the thing is too is like if they really want you, they'll still work with you if you give a price too high.
yeah, yeah, they
Right.
will.
I mean, if you give off $1 million, right, and they're like, we're a budget of 1,000, yeah, they're not gonna talk to you, but within reason, right? But yeah, like again, it's a relationship you're building, right? And I'm
Hmm.
not willing to kind of fight with you, right? Fight in a playful sense. Like, is that a really healthy relationship?
Right. And it depends on the problem you're solving, right? If it's a if
Yeah.
it's a $10 million problem and they're going to spend $1 million with you, I mean, that's a fair trade for everybody. Right. That's kind of how I always
Yep.
value these things is like, if I come in at 10% of whatever the pain point is, like you'd be an idiot not to take it. And of
Yep.
course, but it assumes that you're assessing that risk properly. Is it a $10 million value proposition, or is it a $500,000 that you're paying $1 million for, right? Or is it
Yep.
100 million and you get a
And
million? I don't know.
I've I've noticed that with Gable too. People treat you differently at the price tag. For the smaller companies where we're initially going after smaller contracts, we're like, we just want to put it in and make it work quickly. Um, we don't want to think about this. But then you start getting to the much higher contracts, they're like, we need to introduce you to this team. This is their strategic vision for
Yeah.
this. This is how they want to do this. We can't onboard too quickly because we need to have make sure these stakeholders are involved, right? Um, with the price tag, they're going to be very, much more intentional about how they use their time and resources.
Oh yeah. Especially when you're dealing with more complex enterprises too. There's just so many more
Yeah.
layers, so many, and there's the decision makers that you deal with, and there's the decision makers that you don't see. In a lot of cases, the latter group are the ones that actually are influencing your progress
Yes.
even when you get the deal signed. I've seen this too many times to count. It is what it is, but you don't know who they
Yeah.
are. You hear about these other teams or this other person. You're like, okay, noted.
Yeah, and for
So
me, my goal when I'm talking to those people is like I don't know who that hidden stakeholder is. Maybe they'll show up eventually, but my immediate stakeholder, my champion, I need to make them look exceptional to that person.
yeah.
Because if I achieve that, then I know I'm on the right path.
hmm What's it like these days selling into companies when, I mean, admittedly, there's a lot of turbulence in in the economy right now. You're dealing with a pretty schizophrenic stock market. You're dealing with budgets that I don't even know where they are right now.
Yeah,
There's layoffs happening. Like, what's it like going into this sales motion versus, say, prior years?
I'm actually excited about it. And so to give you kind of my entrepreneurship foundation is really tied to Steve Blank, who did like
Oh
the
yeah.
lean startup. He's based out of Stanford. So how I kind of got into entrepreneurship, I did my master's at Stanford Med, and then also did entrepreneurship programs at the GSB. Fun thing about Stanford is that for me, the really fun classes, you have to apply to get in. So you already paid
Mm,
tuition, but you have to apply to get into the course because it's so in demand. One of the big courses at Stanford is Lean Launchpad,
yep.
where Steve Blank runs this course and basically is almost like an incubator. To get into the course, I had to go pitch my startup idea and recruit co-founders. So I remember I was like in front of the GSB talking to a bunch of MBA students at like 9 p.m. with my horrible pitch and everyone being dead silent, and then try and recruit co-founders from there.
Oh,
And
that sounds
then
brutal.
after you create a team, you got to do an application. Part of the application is you have to do 10 user interviews within 2 weeks.
Wow.
We do that, and then you interview. Right? We got to the interview, we didn't make it past that, right? But that was just like my first kind of like, oh, this is what it takes, and that's what allowed me to get into the next program, which is the Stanford Ignite program. Was at the GSB, which is like how you go to 0 to 1, right? So that failure allowed me into this and see how this is all built. This is all to say that Steve Blank focused on business fundamentals. You need to talk to hundreds of people. You need to understand the problem, and you actually need to build a right business, not just chase valuations and
hmm
go after investment. And so that's where my mindset is. And so for me, great. The funding market is horrible. The selling market is horrible. That means you have to solve real painful problems that aren't fluff.
Yep.
And if you can survive this, the next upswing is going to be amazing for you. And you're gonna solve an actual real problem, not just bloating a budget.
That's very, very true. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I don't think
funny.
I answered your question though. Take a step back. How's it different though from this? I was explaining. I'm comfortable with it, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But how's that changing, right? I think something that was really smart that Chad did is that he said, "I need to focus on the hardest problem that no one else wants to solve." For us, it's going upstream and figuring out how to tie application code to the data itself.
Mhm.
And we haven't really seen people do that. And most people we talk to are like, I haven't seen others do this in the data space, right? It's a hard problem. We're actively always trying to solve it for that. And we now understand why no one else is trying to solve it because it's like freaking hard to do. There's a lot of like deep tech to make that happen. And part of the reason of pursuing that was if you start off the hardest problem that no one else is, you'll be differentiated, you will have less competition, and more importantly, you'll be very directly tied to a pain and value.
Mhm.
And I think that is what allows us to build in this space and like be successful in this space because we're not trying to chase the data warehouse where there's a gazillion DBT competitors and like analytics things. You really go for where there's less competition, and if you get it right, you own the category.
Yeah. So walk me through why is it important to go after the problem of where code and data intersect at the I'm thinking at the application layer as you're describing it, right?
Yeah, the application layer. And for me, where it really comes down to is I come from a research background and clinical research, and a big part of that is research design. How do you collect the data? Because how you collect the data informs what type of research you can do or analysis you can do. Apply that to business. How you collect the data informs what type of questions you can answer, what was actually possible, right? And so for me, data creation is one of the most important aspects of the data lifecycle because that's where you have the most control to allow for what you want to do for subsidiaries or not subsidiaries, derivatives of your data through like ML models, dashboards, whatever it may be, right? And going deeper into that, well, then where is data kind of generated, especially for like an online presence? It's going to be the front end. The front end is where people interact, they do the onboarding workflows, where you have your logs and kind of feelers to get the data out there, right? And that's interacting with the transactional database. That relationship between the front end and transactional database is, I think, one of the most quintessential parts of like data quality for kind of data products today. And if you can solve that data quality problem right there, you can eliminate so much pain afterwards. And more importantly, is if you get the engineers who are doing that, who are not data people, aware of the data problems and aware of how their schemas impact things, how they change the semantics of things will impact things, right? Making them aware, it really changes the dynamic where you have much more stable data and expected data to do these more powerful things, such as like AI, machine learning, data products going back into there. And I think a big reason why that's more important now than before is, 10, 15 years ago, dashboards. Tell me about the past of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more so focused on like, how can we actually build revenue with this asset of data? How can we improve revenue or reduce risk with these assets of data? And that the data is almost like the software in itself. It has to be maintainable. It has to be traceable. It has to be able to like change it iteratively without breaking things unexpectedly. And so we're seeing this elevation of data to the same rigor of software engineers.
Interesting. And what are those conversations like when you talk with software engineers? And the reason I ask is not to generalize too much, but software engineers, at least the ones I tend to meet, they aren't maybe the most data savvy or aware that data
They
is a
don't care.
problem. Right.
They don't care. And the kind of thing I tell myself all the time is that I'm the only one that cares about data. Like I love data quality. Most people talk about data quality people is like paint drying, and I recognize that. And the only people that's going to care about data quality are other data people. And so you're only a small department of the organization. The rest of the business does not care about data. They care about what you can do with data. Software engineers' constraints do not include data for now. I would argue that's going to be changing soon, but it doesn't include it. It's like, can I create maintainable code? Can I keep this website or wherever service up? And can I make sure it's compliant? Right? Data is not part of that kind of piece of it. And so when you go to the software engineers, they hear all these data things. It sounds like extra work that's outside their scope. And data people don't do a service of translating to their needs. We're sticking to the data language. And one of the big things, actually, Vin gave me this lesson. He said that data people think about opportunities, what you can do with data, while software engineers think about managing risk. How can I prevent this kind of blowing up on me, right? And so when you're a data person, you keep on talking about all these opportunities. You can do this, you can do that. Here's all these cool kind of ML things, right? Software engineers just don't care. But the surprising thing we found though was actually they care a lot if you can make it very clear to them, which sounds obvious, right? But it's really hard to find what that language was. And the big aha moment was data lineage. When we go to data people and say, hey, we need data lineage to understand how data is tracing through the system, how things are connected, people are like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes my life so much easier. You go to a software engineer, they're like, what is that? And then you show them a picture of it, and they're like, oh, dependency graphs. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it clicks in their head, and they're like, yeah, how code moves and function calls go through that. And we are quickly like, on the Gable side, we're like, oh, we're ditching the data lineage language. Yes,
Yeah.
dependency graphs. Like that is what we're building, right? And there's like so many different key other elements that once you describe the problem and not in data terms, but in their base units, and allow the software engineers to fill in what that means to them in their own language, and then start adopting that language, all of a sudden it's like a no-brainer to them. And the funny thing is, I wrote an article on this, kind of hard lessons in the first kind of couple of years of implementing data contracts, was most data teams are scared to talk to the software engineering team. They're like, they're not going to
Mm.
listen. They never really listened to us before. And then once we finally get the software engineers on the call and we built up that trust from them, invite them, software engineers are like, wait, data team, you're not already doing CI/CD checks. You're not already doing kind of some unit tests. You're not kind of triaging these things. You think that's like bare minimum from them, and they assume the data people are already doing it themselves. And so they hear this, and they're like, absolutely, we do need to do this. And so I think data people, it's not that software engineers don't want to work with you. You just suck at communicating to them. And if you improve your communication and how to translate your needs to them, they will be more willing to talk to you.
How do data people improve their communication with software engineers?
I'm still learning that one.
Yeah.
I'm still learning that one. But I think the biggest thing is that you need to get out of the data jargon. There's so much jargon in the data space, and that seemed obvious to us, and that will mean completely different things to the software engineers, or just be like a foreign language to them. And so I think the quicker you learn what are the key concepts and frameworks they're working with, right, and then map data concepts to that, it's that mapping. Once you figure out the map of language, then you can make very tailored, and it's similar with content. We're making very tailored content for our audience. You need to do the same within the business. Easier said than done.
Yeah. Have you thought of making any jargon cheat sheets or something like that for data people to
I've
communicate?
thought about it. I've thought about it. That's definitely actually in the
Or a
backlog of content I want to
Duolingo lesson
create.
or something like that? Like,
Right? Like Duolingo. Yeah. Yeah, they have a good content strategy. They're hilarious.
it's really good.
But uh, but I think I'll be able to write that probably by the end of this year. I
Hmm.
think we've recently started really pivoting. So when we first started Gate, we thought we were very focused on data engineers. It turns out we're very focused on software engineers. The reason being is
Told you
that
guys.
yes, you did. Yeah, and the reason being is like they're the ones that have to implement it. If you want kind of constraints in the CI/CD pipeline upstream, that's owned by engineers. They
Yep.
have to be bought in. You have to be incentivized to want these constraints on you. So you have to build for them and all those aspects, right? We didn't really realize that until probably late 2024. And so now we're pivoting hard into thinking about software engineers and their needs.
Hmm.
And so I don't think I can write that article today because I'm still learning. I'm still being in the trenches
Yeah.
and talking to people. But I think by the end of the year, I think I'll have kind of the proof points and the success stories and failure stories to really highlight what that is. With that said, though, is I've identified kind of who that software engineer is you do need to communicate to. I call it the data conscious software engineer.
Mm.
And typically it's someone who is at a staff level who has a more architect role where they see the wider picture of these different systems and silos, and more importantly, how they need to communicate more with them more effectively. And if they have that viewpoint and have exposure to the data team, they're the most prime person to understand the data constraints and needs, how it impacts the wider business, and help be your translator to help map ideas that
Mm.
will land with the software engineering team. And so that has been like the big lesson. So I think I need to talk to more of those people throughout the industry before I can really start thinking about what that mapping of language is.
How do you find those people though? Because that title isn't always, in that role, in that perspective, isn't always clear.
Yeah. I think the biggest one is probably like software architect. That is something like
Okay.
that, or principal software engineer. It's someone who has a scope beyond a single product line or single kind of repo. There's someone who is seen as a business person who's very technical, who can work across different systems and know how to bring in the right people to fix those systems.
Got it.
Yeah, so that is a very squishy role because that can be actually like a director or VP
Could be.
who isn't an engineer role, right? Or it can be a principal engineer who just went down the IC path, right?
Might be the CTO.
Um, yeah, it might be the CTO as well, depending on the size of the org and things like
Hmm.
that. And so it's much harder to find that person. But I would argue if you're within the org already, you have a better chance of knowing who that is.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Walk me through this whole process of shifting left, I suppose, not only in terms of your messaging, but in terms of your whole well, the whole company, really.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I mean, as you know, we're doing a shift left conference, so we're obviously leaned heavily into that aspect. But um, really where the shift left idea came from was, like I said before, that transactional database and the logs. How early can you get into the data lifecycle? And so you think about the data lifecycle going from left to right. And actually, your book, Fundamentals of Data Engineering, that's one of my favorite diagrams actually that highlights the kind of the data lifecycle. Is it starts at the left, the ingestion, the data creation side of things, right? So how can you move the infrastructure over there? And I think one thing I want to highlight here is that, we did not create like the shift left term. That has already existed in the software engineering space and security space, DevSecOps and things
Yeah.
like that, where there was this pattern of security was very federated across various systems. It was hard to maintain and manage a change management around kind of security. And these security teams were kind of spread thin, like things are changing, things are breaking, there's so much risk, right? And shifting and consolidating it earlier where you can have more control and have the people who are actually making those changes be responsible for those changes from a security standpoint. So that's where shift left has really been very powerful, that we've seen. I think what we're doing is like, well, what does that look like for the data industry?
Mm-hmm.
And is the data industry at that kind of tipping point where they're in the same position where very federated, changes are very kind of impactful, and there's a lot of risk or opportunity involved with these data assets? How do you put more change management on there? Well, who's actually making those key changes? Well, it's the software engineers
Mm-hmm.
upstream. And that's where the shift left kind of identity kind of really comes from.
Is there anything left of the software engineers?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest kind of questions that people have for data contracts is like, okay, I don't do application code. I have third party data. I have data vendors. I
Yeah.
ingest data, right? You can make the argument that, the people you're ingesting from, they've created the data, right? But you don't have control over that, right? And so I think another big thing before that is beyond data creation is the data ingestion from other third parties, who may or may not be software engineers themselves, and controlling the quality of that data. And that's, I think, a much harder problem to solve because it's not a tech problem. It's like literally a business problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you adhere to the contract? Yes or no? Not the data contract, but like the paid service agreement contract.
Yeah. It kind of brings
Yeah.
to mind this notion of contract driven development. I don't even know what that looked like, but it's interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, there's actually, researchers. So from doing the book, I've been learning a lot, even more about data contracts. There's a researcher out in Finland who, and I'm blanking on his name. I want to, can I go find his name? I
yeah,
would
go
love
for
to
it.
call it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, let me go find his name. Pause real quick because I think it's really important to call that out. Um, let's see. Why am I blanking? Oh, I put it in Slack. Shift left community discussion. All shift left data. Okay, found him. His name is Hong Ling Trong, PhD, so Dr. Trong.
Huh.
He's been talking about data contracts since 2012,
Okay.
which is insane to me. He's been talking about data contracts, and he's been working on a body of research for 15 years about exactly this. And I went through his research. It's not the same with what we've developed, but and what other people are talking about data contracts, but it's the right direction.
Yeah.
And it's the right kind of concepts and the right problem statements there, for them. So that's someone I think really deserve credit, for thinking about this. Maybe it didn't get the exposure, but I come from a researcher background, so you always have to look like who started this first, who started thinking about this first, how can you reference call those people out?
Oh man.
Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, the researchers, it's an interesting field. Like, yeah, because I mean, typically when you publish, what, like three people read your journal article or something.
exactly.
But like one of my friends, his dad came up with wrote the paper that PageRank is built on. So
Wow.
this guy in University of Utah, James Keener, but he's a climate with his
Yeah.
son, and yeah, it was a paper I think about sports scoring or something like that, and yeah, this was directly what Larry and Sergey used for PageRank. So
Yeah.
And it's a sore point whenever you talk to them. But it's because I mean, you can find these obscure papers, and they some might hold a lot of value. You might want to give this guy a call, really.
I already reached out to him.
Okay,
I was researching him because again, validated contracts. And typically when I'm writing the book,
yeah,
whenever I found a resource that like there's a quick like unlock or opens up a new idea, or I cite them heavily, I always find that person on LinkedIn and message like, "Hey, I'm writing you in this chapter of this book. I love what you're doing. Like, I just want to give you a highlight. Like, you influenced me here." I think that's really
that's cool.
important to
It
send
is
out to those people.
important. Yeah, that's in Finland. This guy's in Finland.
Yeah, he's in Finland too.
Interesting.
So
There's, if I keep saying it's Finland's got one of the highest concentrations of data talent in the world. I think just pound for pound, like
yeah,
it's crazy how many people are like really good there.
yeah, he's
Um,
at Aalto University, AALTO,
huh?
which is like near Helsinki.
Yeah. I wonder if I've been there actually. I don't know. I go to a lot of places. I can't remember where I go. The memory of a goldfish these
Yeah,
days. Kidding.
but I bring him up because he was talking about contract driven development. That was
Yeah.
one
I
of
mean,
the
that's
concepts in the book or in his research.
interesting. Okay, so it's not a new thing, right?
I mean, nothing's really new in my opinion.
It's
It's just how
true.
you position, how you repackage the idea. And I think actually the most successful ideas are ones that are already been validated, but you bring into a new space in a creative way. Like the shift left, already validated in the DevSecOps space. How do you repackage it for the data space in a way that's meaningful?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I guess what is this design by contract? That's something you used to hear a lot about way back in the day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And I think
uh,
what's different is I think when he first came up with it, there was no mechanism to actually make this possible. I think the key thing is the rise of CI/CD being ubiquitous within software engineering teams. Version control with Git and GitHub being like the main dominating force, and then and I think actually like LLMs are a big part of it because I think it opens up the semantic aspect of it,
mm,
where before you didn't really have that. You could do it, but it would be very hard. It
yeah,
lowered the barrier entry for that. So I think that's why it's like why it's happening now.
yeah. That makes sense. I'll dig more into this. That sounds cool. And the first thing I had to Google was contract driven development. Then it comes with design by contract. It's like, oh crap, I haven't heard that term for like
Yeah, I'll go send you. I have a
15
list of
years.
his art. I probably have like 10 articles that I read through that I kept, so I can send those
Super
links
cool.
to you.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Um, Kind of closing out. Like, what's next? What's happening this year?
And for me, the big thing is getting this O'Reilly book out. We are really close. We're finishing up our final chapters. We're gonna go into final editing and then getting the book out. That's gonna be a huge weight lifted off my shoulders because then I can go back to only having one job at a startup
Yeah.
instead of having to being an author and helping build a company. But also, it's just like, wow, I'm finally an author, like a published author,
Hmm.
and I've hit this milestone in my career. I think that's going to be a very like proud moment for me and something I've been really
Yeah.
working hard towards. I joke around being an author is awesome. Writing a book, not so much. um, and it is fun writing a book. I do enjoy writing, but it's very hard and really it can break you sometimes.
It can.
Because of the difficulty of it, right? It's up there with grad school is one of the hardest things I've done. So I think that's going to be a big thing. Another big kind of milestone for us is like for Gable. This is where we're going to be announcing our Series A
Yeah.
relatively soon. I don't know when this is going out, but we're
Soon.
announcing next week.
Nice.
Um,
Dope. Congrats.
and and so that's going to be a huge milestone. And then I think the other big piece for me is like, all right, I'm 2 years at Gable. I typically for startup stints like 4 years, right? I want to build my own company. What am I doing the next 2 years? What am I planning the next 2 years to set myself up, knowing that Chad had to take 2 years to get to that point as well. And
Yeah.
it's not trying to go actively build something, but it's like how do you start talking to people, validating ideas? How do you start really paying attention to the market, what's actually changing, and being intentional about the things you consume and building up a thesis
Hmm.
about where the market should be? And so I think the next kind of big things for me is, Gable, book, and really coming up with a strong market thesis.
Yeah. A strong market thesis is interesting right now, especially I would say this is a time to be coming up with a thesis because there's so many uh, inflection changes occurring right now,
Definitely.
just like phase shifts, and I feel like the whole world's undergoing just a massive. Everything's undergoing a massive change right now, so now's the time to be
Exactly.
considering what this all means. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And actually, that's a big reason why I've been paying attention to AI agents so much is beyond the hype. A couple of years ago, and we had a lot of people in the same circles. People literally quitting their jobs and going all in on agents before it became a hype thing, or
mm,
going all in AI. And when I start seeing those people who are very talented, who work on anything, and they decide to work on that, and I start seeing multiple people do it, I'm like, there's something here. And then now the hype's here already, but it makes me believe that there's going to be something more beyond the hype cycle.
well, there's always something beyond the hype cycle. I think even
Yeah,
with any technology, but like any hype cycle, it tends to attract a lot of hucksters and
definitely,
carnival barking type behavior, and that's just like
definitely.
so you got to I think be in it to win it. Like data was one of these things where I think that was a field where I'd been in it for ages, and then it was not cool back then, and now it's cooler. It was cool. I think it's becoming less cool, but I think it's just because it's established now, right? It's not like it's
Yeah,
a
exactly.
you pass the data science hype cycle and all this stuff, and I think it's just part of what people
Yeah.
do now. So
No longer the sexiest job of the 21st century. That's for prompt engineers now,
it's just yeah, our
or vibe
agent
coders.
engineers, yeah, vibe coders. Oh dear. I should be doing a podcast about that very soon. So should be fun. Well, for people who want to find out more about you, how can they find you?
Man, the best one is LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
That's where I post a lot of the stuff as well. And then where I write, Scaling Data Ops is my own personal blog
Dope.
that I share to all the time. I'm actually probably going to be changing the name to Scaling AI Ops. Again, part of the market thesis building. How do you track and create content to identify the right people and to talk to them?
Yeah.
And then Data Products is Chad's Substack that I typically write to. That's like less vendor focused. And then obviously the book. The book should be coming out, and you can get early release of that book on the Gable website.
Yeah. I'm guessing if you're about done, books published sometime this summer ish.
Yep.
So yeah. Congrats. I'll have to have a
Yep.
party for that, man. It's good. It's a
Oh
big
yeah,
milestone.
definitely. Definitely. I have to get there first. I have to get there first,
I
but
know what it's
definitely.
like, dude. And it's you're in good hands though. I mean, O'Reilly's editing process and publication process is good. I mean, and you guys already have the marketing part down, so I think you guys are gonna have a really good
Exactly.
launch. Yeah, yeah. Maybe in charge could be on the podcast when your book's out. We can chat about that.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be great.
and you guys are still working together too. That's amazing. Co-authoring is a very it can go either way. So
It definitely can. I think what helps is that we're both wrestling with this problem outside the book as well.
yeah, it's just more of a just more of a diary kind of a therapy thing for you then.
It's it kind of is. It kind of is, and I think we're definitely we took longer on the book than we anticipated,
Yeah.
but in the bigger scheme of things, I think that's okay
Nobody's going
because
to penalize. No, the world does not care if your book is like 6 months late. Nobody except
yeah,
you or your publisher is going to care. But the thing, like, they will care if the book sucks, and they will care if the book's
yeah,
good. The only thing that
yeah, and
matters is that
so
it's good.
yeah, so I think the fact that we were late and that we used that time being late, focusing on actually talking to people and what this actually looks like, it's not like a think piece. It's like this is what we've seen in the trenches.
Hmm.
This is what we how we navigated that, and this is how you can navigate it too. That's what I'm really most excited about.
It's dope. Right on, Mark. It's good to see you again.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Anytime, dude. See you soon.
Yep.